Look closely, or die, the elder barked. Sioux kids memorized forests like maps, mastering skills modern soldiers would envy. Childhood wasn't soft, it was a crucible. The Sioux didn't coddle their young. From the moment a child could listen, their education began, not with books, but with stories that carried the weight of survival. Every evening, around flickering fires, parents or grandparents recounted tribal legends or true tales of valor. A boy, eyes wide, lips parted, absorbed every word. The next night he'd be called to repeat the story, word for word. Stumbling wasn't tolerated. Precision was. This wasn't just storytelling, it was mental conditioning, sharpening memory and ambition. A dull mind meant a weak warrior, and the Sioux had no use for weakness. This oral tradition, passed through generations, wasn't mere entertainment. It was a cultural archive, embedding history and values into young minds, readying them for a life where every decision could be their last. Physical endurance came next, forged through relentless practice. Sioux children were taught to endure hunger, cold, and exhaustion without a whimper. Boys, barely past toddling, were expected to face hardship as stoically as seasoned warriors. The forest was their classroom, and its lessons were brutal. Starvation wasn't abstract, it was a test. Complaining was a failure. This toughness wasn't natural, it was drilled into them, day after day, until resilience became instinct. A Sioux boy learned that survival wasn't a gift, it was earned through grit and silence. Modern gym goers chasing mental toughness would have crumbled under the weight of this childhood. Observation was another cornerstone. Elders instructed kids to look closely at everything. A boy returning from a day in the wild faced a barrage of questions. Which side of the tree had lighter bark? Where were the branches most even? These weren't idle queries. They trained a child to read nature like a map, spotting signs of game or danger. A single missed detail could mean starvation or an enemy's ambush. The Sioux turned curiosity into a weapon, honing a child's senses to razor-sharp precision. Today's survival shows, with their staged drama, pale next to this reality. Respect and etiquette were non-negotiable. Children honored adults, especially the elderly, with silence unless spoken to. Direct address was avoided. Instead, terms of kinship or courtesy replaced names, a subtle nod to hierarchy and humility. Generosity was sacred, rooted in spiritual beliefs that tied the Sioux to their land and each other. Kids learned to give without expecting reward, a stark contrast to today's transactional world. Ceremonies, like naming rituals, tied children to nature. Girls' cradles hung from oaks, swaying to the love sighs of the pine maiden, while boys' first steps were celebrated with feasts, marking their bond with the tribe. By age 7, Sioux boys weren't playing, they were training to hunt, fight, and survive. The forest wasn't a playground, it was a proving ground. A boy's ambition burned early, fueled by tales of great hunters and warriors. He didn't dream of fame, he craved mastery, knowing every skill came at the cost of danger. Solitude was his first test. Roaming alone, he learned to embrace the quiet, not fear it. A lone boy in the wild wasn't lost, he was learning to trust his instincts, a skill modern adventurers pay thousands to mimic. Hunting started with simple tools: a bow, arrows, maybe a bone knife. Boys targeted small game rabbits, birds, squirrels. They learned to spark fire with flint or by rubbing wood, a tedious task that taught patience as much as technique. Fishing was another art, using lines of hemp or horsehair, or spears for larger catches. Some dammed streams, herding fish into woven baskets. These weren't hobbies. They were survival. A boy who couldn't hunt didn't eat. Compare that to today's kids, handed snacks for existing. Tracking demanded obsessive attention. A scuffed leaf or a uprooted plant wasn't just debris, it was a clue. Boys studied animal habits. Moose lingered in swamps for weeks. Grizzlies required stealthy approaches. They mimicked doe calls or threw blankets to distract bears, learning to outsmart beasts that could kill them. Wolves, bold when hungry, taught caution. A lone wolf might flee, but a pack wouldn't. These lessons weren't theoretical. A misstep meant death, not a bad grade. Trapping was ingenuity in action. Boys scattered burrs to snare rabbits or set horsehair nooses on springy saplings, yanking prey skyward. Chipmunk hunts in spring were a rite, with groups of boys using blunt arrows and oat straw calls to lure their quarry. They'd freeze, waiting for the leader's signal, then unleash a chaotic volley, arrows bouncing off trees. It It was less about the kill and more about precision, teamwork, and nerve skills that would later face human enemies. Every task built a boy into a warrior. Hunger, cold, and fear weren't obstacles. They were teachers. The Sioux didn't raise children, they forged survivors, ready for a world that offered no mercy. Sioux boys didn't just train to survive, they were sculpted into warriors through rituals steeped in cultural weight. By adolescence, their education shifted from forest skills to the symbols and trials that defined a warrior's honor. Endurance was paramount. Boys were expected to go days without food or water, showing no weakness. They navigated trackless wilderness, day or night, without losing their way. A warrior who faltered wasn't just lost, he was a liability. Modern ultramarathoners might boast about grit, but Sioux boys lived it before puberty. Their training took a brutal turn with surprise drills. Elders would jolt boys awake with war whoops or gunfire, demanding instant readiness. A boy had to leap up, weapon in hand, and respond with a piercing cry, heart pounding but mind clear. Hesitation wasn't an option, it was a death sentence in battle. These weren't games, they were rehearsals for a world where enemies struck without warning. Today's boot camps, with their scripted drills, look like child's play in comparison. Courage was tested relentlessly. New warriors faced hazing on the warpath, sent on perilous tasks like fetching water near enemy camps. Objection was cowardice, so boys complied, even when ordered to repeat tasks pointlessly. One might empty a hard-won pail of water, only to be sent back again. These trials weeded out the weak, forging men who thrived under pressure. It's a stark contrast to today's participation trophies, where effort often outshines results. Symbolism carried deep meaning, especially the eagle feather. The eagle, fierce and regal, represented bravery. Earning a feather wasn't about killing, it was about the coup, touching a fallen enemy under fire, a test of nerve over bloodshed. A warrior might call out, "I, fearless bear, count the first coup," as comrades witnessed his daring. 4 coups earned an upright feather. A wound in battle meant it hung downward. A red-marked feather signaled a scalp taken, a rare and grim honor. 10 successful battles granted a war bonnet, its trailing plumes marking a leader. Unlike today's medals, pinned in safe ceremonies, these symbols were earned in the chaos of war. Feathers told stories. A weasel skin tip meant a warrior killed, scalped, and counted coup in one act. Only the elite wore eagle feathers. Common feathers meant nothing. A chief's son might wear one to honor his father, but for others, it was a privilege earned through blood and bravery. The Sioux didn't flaunt symbols lightly, each was a chapter in a warrior's saga, etched in danger. Sioux girls were raised not for war but for the backbone of the community. From infancy, their training mirrored their mothers' lives. By age 5, girls played mother with doe-skin-clad dolls, mimicking adult responsibilities with eerie seriousness. Mothers guided them, "Do as I do." Girls learned a feminine dialect, distinct from boys, and a single masculine word could bring shame. This wasn't just play, it was preparation for a life of duty, far from today's carefree childhoods. Practical skills came early. Girls wielded miniature tools, elkhorn scrapers, bone knives, stone mallets, mimicking their mother's work. While a mother tanned a buffalo hide, her daughter scraped a corner with a tiny tool, sharpening it when her mother did. They carried water in small bags or hauled sticks, mirroring adult tasks. Even their play was practical. Girls built clay teepees, exact replicas of their homes. This wasn't make-believe, it was apprenticeship, embedding skills through muscle memory. Modern kids' crafts seem frivolous by comparison. Adolescence brought seclusion. Girls retreated to the woods, alone or with a same-age companion, to cultivate womanly qualities. Surrounded by thick foliage, they studied nature's lessons, developing resilience and grace. They practiced sacred dances, crowned with wildflower wreaths, circling birch trees while singing ancient songs. These rituals weren't mere tradition, they forged a spiritual bond with the land, grounding girls in their role as keepers of Sioux culture. Today's wellness retreats, with their curated calm, can't match this raw connection. Craftsmanship was a cornerstone. Girls mastered tanning deer hides in 3 days, using specialized bone tools for each stage. They painted tents, sewed moccasins, and crafted garments for relatives, their stitches a testament to skill and generosity. Every task reinforced their role as providers, not just for family but for the tribe. Unlike modern hobbies, their work had purpose, clothing the vulnerable, strengthening the community. Sioux girls learned silence and strength, their lives a quiet counterpoint to the boys' loud valor. Their training wasn't softer, just different, rooted in the same unforgiving world. They emerged not as warriors but as pillars, holding the tribe together through skill, spirit, and sacrifice. Sioux women weren't just homemakers, they were the social glue holding the tribe together, their lives a blend of duty and subtle power. Generosity defined them, not as a virtue but as a standard. A chief's daughter labored alongside others, tanning hides or sewing moccasins, not for personal gain but to distribute freely. Work was a badge of worth, measured by what you gave away. In a world where accumulation meant nothing, this flipped modern capitalism on its head, like a potlatch where the richest were those who ended up with the least. Their hands moved constantly, crafting for the needy, ensuring no one went without, a quiet rebellion against scarcity in a land that demanded it. Attire reflected this simplicity and grace. A woman's doe-skin gown flowed with wide sleeves, low neckline revealing just enough for practicality in the heat. Leggings hugged close, shorter than men's, paired with plain moccasins. Hair parted in the middle, braided neatly, sometimes wrapped in wampum shells from older times. Ornaments were sparse, beads, elk teeth, a dash of red paint on cheeks. No feathers, unless in sacred dances, keeping their look grounded, functional. It was elegance born of necessity, not vanity, a far cry from today's fast fashion where excess screams status. Sioux women dressed to move, to work, their beauty in the understated strength that turned heads without trying. Social rules were etched in stone, or at least in the tribe's unwritten code. Women stayed occupied with feminine pursuits, from beadwork to gatherings that excluded men. Etiquette demanded poise. Sit sideways on the ground, knees down, feet tucked, never crossed or raised. It was a posture of restraint, mirroring their role as stabilizers in a chaotic world. Conversations flowed indirectly, respect woven into every word, avoiding the brashness boys were drilled in. This wasn't oppression, it was a parallel power structure where women's circles decided matters men never touched, like alliances through marriage or community welfare. Picture it as a 19th century boardroom, minus the suits, where influence came from subtlety, not volume. Leisure brought out their joy, hidden in games that built body and spirit. Summers meant swimming, girls gliding through water like fish, feet together mimicking beaver tails with resonant slaps. It was play with purpose, strengthening lungs and limbs for the rigors ahead. Wand-throwing honed shoulders, a graceful arc of competition. Ball games resembled shinny, curved sticks driving spheres between goals, laughter echoing as teams clashed. Indoors, deer's foot games involved tossing hoofs on strings or plum stones marked like dice, thrown in bowls for points. These weren't idle pastimes, they sharpened reflexes, fostered bonds, a social lubricant in a life of constant motion. Compared to scrolling feeds today, it was interactive therapy, building community one throw at a time. Courtship and marriage wove romance into the fabric of duty. Midsummer reunions sparked flirtations, pairs wandering woods or meeting at springs after dark, always chaperoned for propriety. Young men played flutes, their yodel calls met with girls' sing-song laughs, a melodic chase under stars. A suitor proved worth over a year, hunting for her kin, repeating love tales through seasons. Betrothal led to preparations. Families crafting gifts, sisters adorning the bride. The wedding was ceremonial, bride delivered on a decorated travois, rich clothing distributed among new relatives. It sealed alliances, not just hearts, turning personal bonds into tribal strength. In an era of arranged fates, Sioux marriages blended choice and obligation, a dance as old as the plains themselves. The Sioux forged warriors and women from the same harsh clay, childhood a forge where endurance met culture. Boys hunted shadows. Girls wove the tribe's heart. Yet both paths led to survival's edge. History whispers their resilience, a lesson in what modernity lost. For more forgotten Native tales, subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories, like, and comment your thoughts.